They're not schmaltzy. I just want to get to know her. Help me out, and I'll get you your stuff back pronto. Johnny grabbed him by the coat. So you do have it! Give it back now! Wilson shoved Johnny's hands away. Take your meat hooks off me. I told you, I didn't take anything. I just meant, if you help me, I'll help you. Something about the look on Wilson's face led Johnny to believe it. For once, he was being truthful. Johnny backed down. No thanks. I don't need your help. And Emmy certainly doesn't need you either. He walked away. Fine, Wilson called after him. See if I help with Laszlo anymore. Johnny trudged home, Wilson's question still echoing in his thoughts. Who would give a hoot about his experiments? Only one person came to mind, someone he should have thought of sooner. That was where he'd go next. If his parents didn't ground him for being out so late, that is. This time, Harold actually argued against grounding him, while Fiona argued for it. And this time, Harold prevailed. Johnny wondered whether the spirits of his parents had swapped bodies. He reasoned that his father was as anxious to locate the cloth as Johnny himself was, while Fiona was still working out her grief. Before bed, he told his father what he found out at the Mangle house and his idea of where to look next. Ben Huck, Johnny said. Harold looked confused at a thing that didn't happen every day. Why Ben? He knew about the experiment I was doing. He thought it might help us build a powered wheelchair for Steve. Maybe he picked up the battery and cloth since it was there. Seems like a long shot, but I suppose every option is worth checking out. Johnny nodded. I'll talk to him on Monday. Sunday morning, Johnny dutifully started to dress for church until he realized the usual bustle of the Lord's Day was missing. He peered out his door just in time to see Harold emerge from his bedroom, still in his dressing gown and slippers. Harold noticed him too and said, "We won't be going to church today. We'll read scriptures here at home instead." He made his way to the stairs and descended. Johnny blinked. Things were getting stranger and stranger at the Whitaker house. After breakfast, Harold brought out his Bible, and he and Johnny took turns reading passages aloud. Johnny read mainly from Psalms. It was all he could do to keep his mind on his task. But for Fiona's sake, he focused on reading well, and he noticed a look of what appeared to be bliss on her face as she absorbed the poetic words. When they finished, Johnny retreated to his room. He pulled the script for A Christmas Carol from his book bag and started committing his lines to memory. His familiarity with the story helped a great deal. By the time he came downstairs for lunch, he'd memorized not only his own parts, but several other parts as well. The afternoon Harold withdrew into his study while Fiona and Charlie took a nap. Johnny washed the dishes. Afterward, he knocked on the door of the inner sanctum. "Come in," Harold said. Johnny entered to see his father reading a book. It looked old. "Are you reading for fun or doing work?" Johnny asked. "I find reading pleasurable regardless of the purpose," Harold said. "But to answer the question, I'm researching something." "Is it about the cloth?" Harold nodded. "It is. I haven't had the time or clarity of mind to dig much deeper since last we talked about it, but it's been on my mind a good deal." He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. Johnny couldn't recall seeing such deep sorrow in them before. Harold motioned for Johnny to sit in the chair opposite his own, then unlocked the drawers and opened the bottommost one and pulled from it 2 oversized books and a few folders, which he set on his desktop. Then, leaning forward, he folded his hands. The moment played out as if he were about to give an academic lecture. "John, the historical trail of the cloth is remarkable. In fact, if someone told it to me, I wouldn't believe a word of it. And I'm not telling you that you have to believe the information I'm about to share with you, but I'm going to tell you everything I know, as I promised I would." Johnny sat back and waited. Harold pulled a piece of paper out of his first file and handed it to Johnny. "I think you saw this paper in my office at the college already." It was indeed the one Johnny had seen, with several phrases underlined and circled. Harold continued, "There's a legend that I've been researching many years, primarily because of a conversation I had with Carl Magnol back when you were little. This legend began with a man named Father Lucien. When you gave me the journal to have my contact overseas translate it, I saw the name on a few of the pages." Johnny looked over at the paper. He already knew about Lucien and Gamamel since he snuck into his father's study that night that Charlie caught him. Of course, his father didn't know that. Or did he? He had some crazy ability to know things intuitively. And what about this other name? Gamel? He said. He and Luciana were tied together in a way. Back in the 15th century, Father Lucien had what must have been a vision. In his vision, Gamel instructed Lucien to retrieve some holy relics for protection. Among them, he specifically mentioned a cloak. Lucien found it in a casket. The man inside the casket was Gamel's son, Abelis. And here's one difficult piece to believe. The man had died over 350 years prior, but his body hadn't decayed at all. It was if the man died only hours before. "But how is that possible?" Johnny asked. "Everything that's dead decays." "It does indeed. But his body hadn't." Harold shifted his chair. His eyes locked onto Johnny. Inside the cloak was a piece of papyrus with phrases scrawled on it the same phrases as the ones you asked me to have Professor Mangle translate. Johnny's brow furrowed. So, you think that cloak and the cloth? Yes, I believe the cloth was part of the cloak. The cloth seemed even more significant now. Johnny felt sick that it was gone. His father seemed to know what he was thinking again. Many artifacts with as much or greater value have been lost over time. The Ark of the Covenant, Noah's Ark, the cross of Christ. The Lord is more than able to safeguard those things. If he wants the cloth, it'll be found. Dad, how do you suppose Grandpa got the cloak? Harold slid the information about Lucia back into his folder, set it down, and opened another folder, one Johnny hadn't seen before. I'm not certain. There's a trail to follow, though large gaps of time when nothing is mentioned. However, he handed Johnny several pages. This is one piece I did find. It's a manuscript from nearly 1,000 years ago, written by a group of monks cloistered away in the Middle Eastern monastery, whose chief missionary was to chronicle the history and advancement of Christianity. Johnny swallowed. I don't think I can read this. Harold nodded reassuringly. It's all right, son. I'm giving you permission. No, I mean, I don't think I can read this. It's in Latin. I'm not sure I've learned enough yet. Harold smiled. Give it a try. If you get stuck, I'll help. He leaned back in his overstuffed leather chair. I think you'll find it to be a rather exciting story, he added. Right up an adventure lover's alley. Johnny eagerly began to read. Though the words on the page were in Latin, they appeared in his mind in English. A.D. 1350, Jerusalem. Sir William, Sir Gawain, Sir Geoffrey, and Sir Richard, Knights of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, crept down the narrow passageway. They had tried to stay out of the sector of Jerusalem of late, since the Black Plague had taken many these past months, and it was no respecter of persons. It would slay a knight as readily as it had the Mamluk soldiers who ruled over the city, or the Jewish Christians who had survived persecution. Now only a few of those believers remained, although the knights added to their saintly number. They received word from an ally, Mongol warrior, that the crypt which enclosed the most holy relics had been compromised, and Mamluk soldiers were already inside, looking to desecrate, destroy, or plunder the sacrificed objects. Within minutes, the order had arrived, for it was their sworn duty to protect the relics at any cost, as they were the history and the future of the faith. The others of their order were out on patrol when the news came. Sir William hoped they would arrive in time. The Mameluke soldiers always traveled in large packs. The knights would be outnumbered, but to tarry would mean the loss of untold treasures. If nothing else, their death would buy more time for their fellow chivalrous soldiers to arrive. William alone knew the importance of this mission, for the crypt was the most precious relic known to have survived the ages. The tale of relics had been entrusted from guardian to guardian since the priest Lucian discovered it nearly a millennium ago. Lucian had been visited in a vision by the prophet Gamaliel and told where to find the holy relics, including the cloak, which rendered the body of Edimus incorruptible. Upon discovering the cloak, the bishop who had accompanied Lucian said that the cloak would go with him, but Lucian would not allow it, as Galaman had stated specifically that the cloak was entrusted solely to his care. Lucian held him off for 3 years, but the bishop was insistent. He eventually came to transport all the relics to Constantinople, where they would reside in the church of the holy deacon Lawrence. But Lucian fooled the bishop, for he replaced the true cloak with another that resembled it. He then sequestered the true cloak into this crypt for safekeeping. It is said that when he did, rain returned to the drought-stricken region and saturated the land. Now these noble knights were about to rain down on the invading Mamluks. They arrived to the door leading into the crypt. The Mamluk soldiers stood guard, and William signaled for Sir Jeffero to let fly an arrow. He felled the man readily. Within seconds they were in the crypt, but they were woefully undermanned. For nearly 30 Mamluk soldiers were inside. The only advantage offered the knights was the element of surprise, for the Mamelukes were busy sorting through which relics they intended to loot before they destroyed the rest. Sir William and the others leapt upon first one and then another, their swords in full action and wasting no motion. The room had little light, but the darkness was also the knight's ally, for by the time the Mamelukes could gather themselves and react, they did so in panic, as they could see nothing but the flashes of swords and the bodies of their slain fellow soldiers littering the floor. In but a moment half of the time, Mameluke soldiers had been dispatched. The remaining Mamelukes rallied, experts in close quarter combat. They soon proved equal to the knight's challenge. The commander of the Mamelukes garrison was a skilled swordsman by the name of Teuclus, and Sir William recognized him instantly. Teuclus was engaged at present with Sir Richard, who was more than capable with blade. Shadows danced along the rock wall as the fight pressed on, like pictographs of an era long past. Sir William fought against two soldiers, his swords in one hand and his mace in the other. William had the advantage in skill and speed, but his greatest advantage was his wit. He feigned fatigue, pretending to falter. When the impatient soldiers saw an opening, they became too hasty. The man to William's left parried, then quick thrust his sword to draw William's defense, while the other raised his sword to slash a fatal blow. William guessed at the plan. He leapt backwards while deflecting the first soldier's attack, then quickly advanced on the second, bringing the full force of his mace against the soldier's side. Once the man had fallen, he turned to the other side and sprung with full force. He finished off the Malek easily. William scanned the room. What he saw chilled him to the bone. Sir Richard, who had been ably advancing against Turkus, made a fatal error. Richard thrust, but Turkus parried the blow, then deftly grabbed Richard by the arm and swung him about directly into the path of a slashing blade directed by Turkus. The blade cut deep into Sir Richard's shoulder and neck. He instantly went limp and slumped to the ground. At the other end of the sword stood Sir Geoffrey, horror-stricken that his sword was the tool that stole the life of his comrade. Turska took the advantage and moved to slay Sir Geoffrey as well. Sir William sprang into action. Turkus grabbed at Geoffrey's hand, disarming him. Imagining an easy kill, he too made a fatal error, for he did not see the maniac face of the man rushing towards him, nor the mace in the man's right hand. Turkus left his head defenseless, and that's where Sir William's mace lodged. He somehow swung wildly back at William, who managed to dodge the massive blade, and in one swift move ramped the tip of his sword through Turkus's chin. There was nothing left for the soldier to do but die. Still, the battle was not over. Seeing their leader fall doubled the Malek soldiers' resolve. Then it seemed they might recover and defeat the three remaining knights. A loud uniform yell halted the action. Flowing through the entrance were more than a dozen additional knights, led by Sir Edward of Woodstock. As only 10 Malek soldiers remained, they were now woefully outnumbered. Sir Edward spoke forcefully. "Lay down your swords, and you shall live. Fight, and you shall die." The Maleks, to a man, did not hesitate. All moved swiftly to attack, but they did not have a chance. They fell within minutes at the skillful hands of the knights of the Order of the Holy sepulture. Sir Edward raised his blade to them. They died with honor. The other knights raised their blades as well, all except Sir William, who knelt beside Sir Richard. Richard's wound was mortal, though he had not yet succumbed. His eyes were dark, as if a curtain had been pulled over them. His breathing was shallow. He motioned for Sir William to come closer. William gently gripped his comrade's head. "Yes, my friend. We are brothers, you and I. Are we not? The best of brothers." "The best." Richard's face turned paler by the second. "Is it safe, the sacred cloak?" he asked. "I do not know," William answered. Richard's brow contracted in anger. "Then go find it, man! Waste not time with me!" "If it is here, it will still be here. If it is gone or ruined, there is nothing more to be done. What is needful now is that I commit your soul to God." William began to pray. Richard stopped him. "My soul is ever God's. Your duty. I must know the cloak's fate before I die, that I may account of it to the Lord when I see his face." William reluctantly nodded, then rose and surveyed the sight. It was a gruesome scene. Bodies heaped upon one another, bloody pools of mud, the lives of men extinguished. In addition to Richard, two other knights had fallen, Sir James Grey and Sir Walton Armholt. Men he had fought beside for more than 10 years. Men who had left behind wives and children. Scattered among the bodies were skulls and broken shards of bone. The Millard soldiers obviously had not intended to keep these scarred relics, instead tossing these holy articles aside as if they were worthless. Other items were also strewn about, among them a wooden cross, scrolls, a shattered clay pot with ashes about it. Fortunately, William knew something that heathen soldiers could not know. The cloak had been secreted away in a cleft of the wall that could not readily be seen. He himself had placed it there. No other knight, save one, knew of its location. For, like Lucian and other guardians of the cloak before him, William had been given the direct command to protect the cloak at all costs. The only other who knew where it lay was Sir Gawain, and he had only been told in the event that William could not carry out his duty due to death or betrayal. Sir William looked about the crypt, making sure no eye followed him. He moved to the end of the room. The light did not reach the space, so no one could see what he was about. The cleft was not large enough for a hand to pass through, save for a portion up near the ceiling where the wall had fragmented. With no small effort, William pulled free a rock. embedded there. Then he reached into the opening. "'Tis not here." A voice behind. "'Tis not there," a voice said behind him. William turned. Sir Edward stood before him, his hand gripping the hilt of a sword. "Edward, what have you done?" "Fear not, the robe is safe," he said, "in a place only I know of." "How? When?" "A week back. I relieved the guards on duty." But how did you know where it had been hidden?" "Gawain says much when he is drunk, much." "The robe is a sacred object." "The robe is a sacred object, Edward. It is not for men to decide its fate or how it is used. You know that." "What I know is that it is my possession. What you need to know is that it will not help you." Before he could react, William saw the torchlight flash off of Edward's blade, the burning heat of the blade penetrating his armor and severed his lungs. William fell to the ground. Sir Edward smiled cruelly. He whispered, "The cloak cannot save your life." "Not anymore." Sir William looked on him, his eyes opened wide in astonishment. Edward sheathed his sword. "I cannot have you telling anyone. This is the only way." Sir William's eyes slowly closed, and the world became lost to him. Edward turned and called out, "Quickly, come! Sir William has fallen!" In a moment, the troop of knights stood beside him. Sir Grauffy knelt next to the valiant warrior. Sir William is sleeping with the saints," he said softly. "A noble knight, if e'er there was one." Sir Edward added. Sir Gawain bent his knees. "Almighty Lord, we ask thee to take the soul of your servant Sir William Hawkwood into your bosom, through Christ our Lord." All the room added, "Amen." They dispersed to complete their task, remove the dead, and restore the sacred relics to their rightful places. Sir Gawain stopped Sir Edward. "How did this happen? I saw him a moment ago. He was untouched." "I know not. Perhaps a Merlik soldier gave his last to slay him." Then Sir Edward of Woodstock walked off. Sir Gawain Mac Illuminatic placed his hand in the cleft where the cloak had been hidden. It was not there. Johnny looked up, a quizzical expression on his face. "I don't understand. Who wrote this?" The only person who would have known about Sir Edward's treachery was Sir Edward, and Sir William, of course, but he was dead. Harold smiled. "Good observation. I had the same question, which means either this story is a legend, a completely fabrication, the ravings of a madman, or the truth." Harold nodded. "Possibly. We can't know which, at least not yet. We don't have the rest of the account." Do you have any leads? Johnny asked. My friend oversees me. Hopefully he'll complete the translation of your grandfather's journal soon. We should know more then. Johnny gazed off pensively. Harold watched him for a moment, then smiled. You look just like I imagine I do when I'm thinking. What's on your mind? I don't know. That's not true, his father said. You know what's bothering you. What is it? I just wondered, is there anything else in your files that you haven't shown me? Harold pursed his lips, looked up in thought, and said, No, I don't think so. Johnny looked past his father to the credenza behind him. Harold had just lied to him. Johnny knew that his father had said what his father had said couldn't be true. He remembered the pages he saw hidden in the family Bible, the ones Harold had taken out of the Bible before giving it to him to do research for his uncle G.W. McClintock. The pages chronicled something that happened to Johnny when he was a toddler, something for which his father confessed to leaving him and his mother Janice. Those pages were sitting in the bottom drawer of the credenza right now. A wave of resentment welled up inside Johnny, so powerful he almost called out his brother's falsehood. But just then, a muffled peal of laughter from Charlie and Fiona made its way into the study. The sound was startling and caused both Johnny and his father to look up in the direction. There had been such a vacuum of laughter in the house the past week that hearing it now seemed unnatural. With great effort, Johnny suppressed the urge to call out his father. Don't rock the boat, he thought. More laughter and giggles and an unconscious smile formed on Johnny's face. He took a deep breath and turned back to Harold, who was also smiling, as if on cue. They both rose and headed upstairs toward the sound. It was coming from the grown-ups' bedroom. Father and son stopped at the doorway. Mother and daughter were on the bed playing patty cake, or trying to. Fiona held up her hands for Charlie to pat, but when the girl tried, Fiona moved her hands around so Charlie missed each time. Charlie found it hilarious, and of course, when Charlie held her hands up, Fiona couldn't see where to pat them, so she missed too. Which Charlie also found hilarious. The child's laughter was infectious. Each shriek of laughter was met by Fiona's musical chortles. Harold also started chuckling and joined them in their game. Johnny stayed in the doorway, smiling, watching the scene in wonder. He had never heard anything sweeter, and yet he marveled that it could be brought on by something so silly, and in the face of such tragedy. It was also not lost on him that he had no memory of his father ever playing with him the way he now played with his stepdaughter. At that moment, he realized what bittersweet actually meant.